And we're back. My guest here is Chuck Augustin. I'm again your host, Tom Gibson. And at the break, Ray had called in and we were discussing the frustrations that people have with the court system. But our program tonight is more geared toward, it's geared toward, and you might be confused because this is a story or a show about Nye County, but I wanted to put in there that the big picture affects the little guy here in Nye County, and if the people in Nye County are more observant and critical and think outside the box and don't believe anything the government tells you and only believe a smidgen of what you hear on the radio or television, then you'll be much better off. So anyway, go ahead, Chuck, where we live off?
Well, for one, Ray, I got my court observer badge on, and the flagman absolutely talked me into coming to court. Now, I was in court, which I won't go into, but Tom was my lawyer, and I got off at the preliminary hearing over an absolutely ridiculous charge. Here I am, retired Navy, NSA, top secret, all this blah, blah, hero crap that they feed us. Yet, as I sit here at 65 years old in Pahrump, Nevada, the biggest fear outside of my health, and I've had a lot of health problems, but the biggest fear I have is the Nye County Sheriff's Office. Now, this isn't necessarily a slam on Nye County Sheriff's Office, because I'd say the same thing in Las Vegas, Chicago, New York, or wherever I'm at. In other words, we have come to fear our government in all aspects. No matter how law-abiding you've been, I've never had a ticket, never had anything. I've had lie detector tests up the yin-yang. So no matter how squeaky clean you are, eventually the system gets you to the point that you are afraid of them. Right. And not only afraid, but you know 99% of what you're told is a total lie or a gross exaggeration.
Well, and to add on that, in your case, Chuck was accused of breaking out these people's windows in a house across the street from him. And now these people, like Pahrump, there's no real zoning. Chuck has a nice place. He's got a golf set up for his backyard, and these people would come by from across the street through his yard to go to their marijuana fields to pick up their, this is before it was legalized.
Allegedly.
Yeah, to pick up their, and they'd steal his golf ball. So he complained about it and complained and said he was going to call the police. And then what do they do to retaliate? They called the police on him and showed the cops the broken windows and said that Chuck is the one that broke them out. Well, anyway, I had fun with. I can't remember even. I remember there's two witnesses, and
yeah.
They were fun chewing up.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big blur to me because I do that so often. But I did, But I will say that was the first time that Judge Ronald Kent has ever discharged a preliminary hearing for lack of evidence ever, and it's that's a real shocker because you only need a scintilla of evidence to bind it over. And when he said stand, please stand when he's going to deliver his verdict, and I said to Chuck, here comes the screw job, and then he said, I'm dismissing this, and I'm like, and Chuck was like, yeah, that's a good idea. I go, no, you don't realize this would happen. The Holy Stone just rolled. So anyway, and you could like drop a pin in the court because nobody believed it. Remember that? But anyway, but the whole thing is how Chuck was treated by law enforcement in that they didn't believe him. They believed the first person that made the call. They were accusing him of, they said, you have a gun or something to that effect? Or?
Oh, yeah. Someone had banged on my door from the neighbors. Now, there was like 50 people daily in and out of there through my property, and they're still coming through, but not in the numbers by any means. Anyway, this guy banged on the door, and he said, I hear you're going to report me to the police. I said, yeah, if you don't stop trespassing. Then he goes home and calls the cops and says, this guy broke out 2 of our windows, and they'd been broken for 6 months. There's 4 more broken now.
I'm sure.
And I hadn't played golf. I had 2 open heart surgeries, both that failed. So I hadn't touched a golf club in over a year. And I just came back from the cardiologist who told me there's nothing more they can do. Well, it turns out there was, and a year ago I got a stent that basically made a new person out of me. At any rate, the funny thing in life, and I think it would be neat to get into some of this, is what goes around comes around, we're told, or if we're spiritual, you know, God does punish the evil or whatever. Well, Judge Kent, who I felt treated me very poorly after my 2 open hearts and all the rest, turns out he just had open heart surgery. And I can't say I'm glad, but I'm sure not upset, because I've had 2 of them and they're no fun. And they're even less fun when you come home from a cardiologist who tells you there's nothing else you can do and you get charged with a crime. And then the system beats you up.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do. You're powerless. You can't even open your mouth. You got, you know, the lawyer has to do all the talking, and this is a good lawyer, believe me. But you're helpless.
Oh, that's true. Hey, we got a caller. No, just dropped the caller. Sorry about that. You want to call back? We'll pick up. Right, and it's not, you know, it's not always just one person's fault. It's a fault of the entire system. I mean, the judge isn't. I mean, the judges are not supposed to dismiss cases unless there's grounds to do it. The DAs aren't supposed to just dismiss or you know, not file charges unless they got reason. But and the cops, you know, well, they're not supposed to arrest anybody or charge anybody or even, you know, take a report if there's no basis to it. And they're pretty good about that a lot of the times. But it's inconsistent. You got one cop will use his discretion and say, you know, there's nothing here. We got another cop go, well, let the DA decide. Well, this guy sits in jail or sweats out, you know, having to go to court. So
and it becomes a personal thing on the cops' part. If they don't like you, you're going to be charged with something.
I've heard of those.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, so coming full circle, so that we got our say on the court system. What I want to go talk about next, though, is not just the courts, but you know, politics right now and what's going on in the world. Right now, I'm personally upset by what's happening in the Middle East. There's a lot of people that are really upset about Syrian refugees. You know, I wouldn't have a problem if the refugees were coming over and it was a mixed bag, Christians, you know, Jews and Muslims. But there's the Christian Syrians aren't coming over here. It's and there's certainly no Jewish Syrians coming over, and they're out there. They really are. So the only ones that are coming over here are Muslims. So why is that? Is it because our president is a Muslim? I mean, some people say he is. You know, time will tell, right? I mean, but anyway.
Well, will it?
But anyway, that said. So anyway, this is one of the things that's bothering me is this immigration thing when it comes to bringing people, you know, the Syrians in, because they're real selective who they're bringing in, and if they're only bringing in Muslims, so does that mean that they're going to eventually, you know, go past what the state governors are saying? No, we don't want them, and bring them in, and then we have them as our neighbors, and what are we to do when? You know, when their lifestyle doesn't agree with ours, and with historically with other, you know, immigrants, they assimilated. But it doesn't work that way with a lot of the people that are Muslims. And I'm not saying that they can't assimilate, but the ones in particular that we're having problems with, they're not trying to assimilate or become Americans. They're trying to make this, you know, the new Mecca.
Mm-hmm. Well, the way I look at the world in a way now, and I spent 16 and a half years overseas, I can't imagine as an American wanting to leave America unless America became so bad I wanted to leave America. The same, I think, applies to every country in the world. Why would you want to leave if you had a happy life in your country? The thing is, most people in every country have been exploited so much by the powers that be. And I'm a big guy on what they call conspiracy, which I think is the most ridiculous term in the world. because it's a fact. You look at our people, and I'm 65 years old. My childhood was so much better than my daughter's. And her childhood was so much better than the grandchild's. And I don't think this is just an old person's perspective, you know, the good old days. The food was awesome. It was nourishing. It was affordable. My dad was very low middle class, but yet he worked alone. My mom was a housewife. And a family of four had no problems making ends meet. And you look what happened to us now.
And I remember as a young child, when it was a big deal if the wife in a family, because we had actually a husband and wives and kids in those days, and they all lived together in the same house.
Wow.
Imagine that. But
you're old.
Yeah, but and then when things started changing in the mid to late '60s, and the women started getting in more and more in the workplace, and that's when things. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying it changed the dynamic to an extent where the kids weren't getting the nurturing that they have been.
Absolutely.
The positive side is the fathers actually became better nurturers, and then the mothers, a lot of them became a little more disassociated.
Well, it is. It's insane. You look at the poor kids today. Who's teaching them? The answer is really television, the computers, the cell phones. That's where they get almost their whole basis of knowledge now.
Well, unfortunately, the school systems will ruin them too.
Yeah, and it goes back in a way to what I said at the beginning is there anything you can believe? I mean, we accept that what they're being taught in school, the curriculums, et cetera, all make sense and all have truth in it. But yet you go through the history books, and I've got a granddaughter who's graduating this year and two others that are just kind of at the beginning of school, so I read a lot of their textbooks, et cetera. And their version of history is totally different than what I accept as history, having read vast amounts of versions of history.
Right. Well, and a lot of the history changes about every 10 years, and it's rewritten by what I would call the vast liberal conspiracy, because the liberals are more concerned about making people feel good about themselves rather than dealing with their own problems and becoming stronger because of it.
Well, there again, I hate in a way this thing called liberal conservative. I would never become a part of a political party unless they started acting like they care about the people. And I don't care how many lies they tell during a campaign or how many excuses why they couldn't do something. They don't work for us. They work for some rich bunch that have nothing to do with America and probably aren't even Americans.
Right. On our next segment, I'd like to get into that too, because one of my pet topics is the New World Order, and as much as you know what, the people that are in the behind the New World Order, we're talking about the upper 1%. They don't deny the New World Order. And Henry Kissinger has repeatedly talked about New World Order.
Rockefeller, Rothschild.
All of them, yeah, and including the presidents. I mean, you had Bush Sr. talked about it, Obama, and so they go on and on and on about the New World Order. So it's not a, even the Brits, I saw Tony Blair through the last guy, I forget his name now, what's his name, the guy with the Prime Minister of England now?
The one now?
Yeah. It's not Tony Blair.
No, it's not Tony Blair. But who knows who really runs the country?
Well, no, obviously, but they even talk about the New World Order when I've seen them in their speeches.
Absolutely.
So it's there, and we'll talk more about it
coming up. This is great. Thank you.